Here's the problem with the black condition. Black people don't like the way they're treated, but they don't necessarily dislike the system. The reason why you have Don Lemons and Russell Simmons and Oprah Winfrey's and Bill Cosby, the reason you had the previous guest who wanted to defend their lack of accountability to the black community, it's because black people suffer from what W.E.B. Du Bois called a double consciousness. We are African Americans, which means we are the victim of Americanism, but then we are also loyal to the Americanism that victimizes us. That split consciousness that we have makes it difficult for us to move ahead, because we are at the same time being separate from America. We are part of it by virtue of the conditioning that has been inflicted upon us, which is why you have black people say, I'm more American than I'm African. Or why do we even have to say we're African anymore? You know, the whole so-called post-racial America, ever since Obama has taken office, which actually paved the way for Zimmerman to be acquitted, as a matter of fact. But we have to understand how, as the people, and the way we think and our mindset actually creates the context that allows us to be treated the way that we are.
Interesting. I want to go back on that Zimmerman thing in a moment, but right now let's go to line 3 and we talk to Shayon in Long Beach, California. You too can join us at 877-373-9766. Shayon?
Yeah, Brother Umar, it seems like they still practicing what you diagnosed as escapism, which is totally funny to me that they don't like to, black people don't like to admit that those elite black Americans have these financial ties to the system, and they're not going to jeopardize that. And that in turn allows them to go out and do what Russell Simmons did, because they don't fear any repercussions from the black community, and they know that the system which they are financially tied to is going to encourage it and going to look the other way. How many Anti-Defamation League people you seen come out and denounce the video? None of them. But if the shoe was on the other foot, not only would you see, if a black person made an anti-Semitic film of that kind, you would see Russell Simmons and you would see all the civil rights leaders out there before the Anti-Defamation League. They'd be out there first, before them. But you don't see that on the reverse side. But my main question was, have you ever read a book called Bridges and Boundaries? And it's a series of essays. And one of them is by David Levering Lewis. And in that essay, he pretty much explains the financial ties of the black elite to the, quote, capitalistic Jewish system, money system in the United States. And that's what, when I read that, all the questions was answered for me. So I don't walk around wondering why Russell Simmons did what he did. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Shayon.
Well said. I mean, you also have to look at the fact that Russell Simmons, you learn a lot from a black man by his choice of a mate. And as you know, Russell Simmons was married to an Asian woman, Kimora Lee Simmons, and then I don't know if he remarried the woman he's with now, but she's clearly a white woman. So you learn a lot from a black man by looking at his choice of a mate, because that is a real good telltale sign of where his loyalties lie. To go from an Asian woman to a white woman and never even entertain the possibility of being with a black woman clearly shows us that Russell Simmons' loyalty is with the European community, not the African American community. You cannot be in love with a woman of another race and claim to be loyal to your own race, because your choice of a mate is more political than it is romantic. Who you marry is a political decision. And so for any black person, especially a rich black person, to go out of their way to marry somebody from another race clearly shows that the loyalty is not with us.
All right, hang on, Dr. Johnson. We've got to take a break. Thanks for staying with us, folks. Of course, you can also reach us on Facebook and Twitter at carlnelsonshow.com. Our guest is Dr. Umar Johnson. Number to call to speak to him is 877-373-9766. All the lines are wide open. Dr. Johnson, before the break, you said that Zimmerman was exonerated because of President Obama's election. Can you explain that for us?
Yes, indeed. Not because of President Obama's election, but because of the myth of the post-racial society that black people so willingly bought into as a result of Obama's election. Everything that happens racially in America happens within the political context. So normally a precedent is set that creates a certain type of climate that allows things to happen. And so basically, by by black people buying into this illusion of inclusion, this belief that somehow tokenism in the form of a black president automatically meant progress for the entire race, which was total nonsense. That created the context whereby the defense, the prosecution, the state's attorney, even Zimmerman's parents, his mother and father, and my heart goes out to both of them, but even they were willing to say that they didn't think the case had anything to do with race. That would have been impossible had the Zimmerman-Trayvon incident took place around the time of Hurricane Katrina or around the time of the Rodney King beating. It was the context of the illusion of black progress that actually set the stage for him to be exonerated, because we, the black community, started questioning whether or not racism exists, started questioning whether or not we need separate black institutions, started questioning whether or not there's really discrimination based on race in America anymore, by allowing the Hispanic or the immigrant or homosexual agenda to replace ours, because allegedly our civil rights agenda had been fulfilled as a result of Obama's election. It was our change in attitude towards racism in America that created the context that allowed him to be acquitted. So I maintain that it wasn't the jury who let Zimmerman go free. It was black people.
Wow, deep. 877-373-9766. I'm see if folks agree with you. Let's go to line one. Chris is in St. Louis, listening to us on the internet. Chris, you're on with Dr. Johnson.
Good morning to you and your guests, and I love this brother. That's what I like about a brother that speaks out and tells the truth about what's going on. But, I just want to ask him, have there ever been, well, I got 2 or 3 questions I want to ask. Have there ever been an all-black jury convicting a white person? And were the people that was hanging black people during slavery in the 50s or 60s, were those people mentally ill, bloodthirsty, white people just wanted to just hang black people and wasn't charged with anything? And another question about Emmett Till. I cannot forget Emmett Till. When I look at that face, what they did to Emmett Till, I just can't help from talking about it. And my own black people tell me I should forget about that was in the past. And we have some of these same people that represent us right up there in Washington, thinking like Ku Klux Klan members. Well, they probably are Klan members. They just took their sheets off. I just want you to comment on that for me, please. I love you, brother, and always speak the truth, whether it kills you or not. Thank you.
Appreciate the words. As far as capital punishment goes, or the death penalty, we know that at one point in American history there was a moratorium on the death penalty. But when we look at the death penalty is racially loaded. I mean, most of the people who are actually killed by way of the death penalty are disproportionately African American and disproportionately poor African American. So I happen to be one who's in favor of eliminating the death penalty. Not that I don't think certain individuals shouldn't be put out of their misery, but I understand. I support the death penalty. I'm also supporting a criminally injustice system that is going to disproportionately take the lives of black people. As far as an all-black jury finding a white person guilty of a crime, I've never heard of that in my life, and I'm a political science major. I've never seen that type of a case. You definitely wouldn't have had one before 1965. I can tell you that. Now, whether or not there's been a case of an all-black jury finding a white person guilty of murder since 1965, I don't know. 50 states, it might, but I doubt it, because as Chief Sir Roger Taney said, the black man has no rights that a white man are bound to respect. That was what he proclaimed in the Dred Scott case, and I think Zimmerman's acquittal has reinforced Taney's decision, which has never been overturned since the Dred Scott case. We have no rights that the white man are bound to respect.
Hang in there, Dr. Umar Johnson. We're going to take a break. Folks, the lines are wide open. You can reach him at 877-373-9766. We'll take your calls for Dr. Johnson. And thank you for staying with us, folks. Of course, you can reach us on Facebook and Twitter at carlnelsonshow.com. Our guest is Dr. Umar Johnson. As I mentioned, we have black royalty with us. He's a direct descendant of Frederick Douglass. He's also a psychologist, a Pan-Africanist, a Garveyite, political scientist, and his best-selling book is called The Psycho-Academic Holocaust Against the Black Boys. The number to call to speak to him, as I mentioned, lines are wide open at 877-373-9766. Let's go to line 2. Betty's listening to us in Cleveland on 1490. Betty, you're on with Dr. Umar Johnson.
Yes, good morning. I have a question for the doctor. He made this statement. I'm not giving his exact words, but he made the statement about Russell Simmons and his mindset toward black people could be questionable because he was married to an Asian woman and he's now, I believe, dating a white woman. So my question is, since you are a direct descendant of Frederick Douglass, the abolitionist, how do you feel about him being married to a white woman, especially in the 1800s when that was really a taboo? That black men were getting lynched back then. So do you think he was sincere about what he was doing, being an abolitionist, and after being married to a black woman, I think for over 30 years, and after she passed away, he married a white woman. So how do you feel about that?
Excellent question. First, I want to put it in context. As you begin to say, married to his wife, Anna Murray Douglass, the black woman who helped him escape from slavery for 50 years.
Right.
And it wasn't until he was an old man and Anna Murray died that he married his assistant, who was the white woman. Rumor has it that Anna specifically told the white woman to be by his side and continue to take care of him after she had died. That does not, in my opinion, justify the marriage. I don't condone it. I don't think it was correct, but I do think it needs to be put in context that Frederick Douglass was a very old man when he married the white woman, was only married to her for about a decade, if even that, before he actually passed on. So it's important to note that all 5 of his children was born to him by a blue, black, purple-skinned African woman. But no, I don't condone interracial marriage. I don't think what he did was correct. And in fact, his daughter, my cousin Rosetta, for those who know the history intimately of Frederick Douglass, they'll know that his daughter took issue with him marrying that white woman. And my belief, I firmly believe one of the reasons why he did that or felt that it was acceptable to do it is because of his own biracial parentage. Frederick Douglass, as was his brother Stephen, who's my direct ancestor, they were the children of white men who had forced themselves onto their mothers. So he was biracial himself. And what I find amongst a lot of biracial Africans is that they feel it's okay for them to marry outside their race since they're half white anyway. But to answer your question, I don't condone it.
Okay, well, my question is, back in those days, being biracial was not acceptable. You still were not considered white, and he still was considered as a slave. And he was still treated as one. And so, like what I'm saying, it seemed like that's just the protocol of the the elite blacks, that they're supposed to marry somebody white if he would risk his life, because even though he was biracial, he wasn't considered white, and he still could have been lynched like all the white black men. And so it seems that they all want to risk their life to marry somebody white, and in his day, that to me, he really was risking his life in the 1800s. And so that's all I have to say.
Well, at the time, and I think we all need to do a little bit more research on Frederick Douglass, because a lot of times statements are thrown out about Douglass and Garvey, but they're not put in the proper context. He was a dignitary of the state at the time, so the likelihood of him being lynched was few and far in between. And although he may have been considered African by the white people, that doesn't erase the fact that he was of a European father. That doesn't erase that. And whether you were biracial in the 1800s or biracial today, although you understand that you are an African, that does not eliminate the fact that one of your parents belonged to the other race. And as I said, I believe that one of the reasons why he felt it was acceptable is because he himself was of European parentage. But I want to be clear about something. You cannot compare Frederick Douglass to Russell Simmons in no way, shape, or form. Frederick Douglass risked his lives for black folk on several occasions, even having to leave the country. He was almost murdered on several occasions. Here's a black man on the 4th of July who told white people exactly what he thought about them and the mockery of their so-called Independence Day in front of their face when he was supposed to be celebrating them. So I want to be clear that Frederick Douglass does not get put in the same category as a Russell Simmons, an Oprah Winfrey, a Bill Cosby, or a Barack Obama. He is a man with a track record that is probably greater than any black man to have ever walked the earth in the last 300 years.
All right, 877-373-9766. Number to call and speak to our guest, Dr. Umar Johnson. Of course, as you mentioned, he's a direct blood relative of the great Frederick Douglass. Let's go to line 3. My aunt is joining us from Durham. She's listening to us on 750. My aunt?
Yes. Greetings. I guess what I have is more of a comment that I would like Dr. Umar to tap into. I think one of the things in listening about us losing our respect as black people, one of the things that I think that, I'm going to say it may be controversial, but I'm going to say it, we have always been a very spiritual people, even when we were enslaved, even through all of the turmoil that we have gone through. We've marched, we've done everything. And I feel like it's time for us to turn up the lever on our spiritual practices in the sense of, of getting justice on some of these things. If Harriet Tubman shows up for the next 3 to 4 days in front of, if Russell Simmons has to spend the night with Harriet Tubman standing over his bed, telling him what she used to do to people like him, maybe we'll have a little bit more respect for our ancestors. If certain plagues and things like that are unleashed on some of these people, and I'm not talking about just George Zimmerman, I'm talking about retroactively. I'm not talking about killing people or things like that, but something happened, not through the justice system, but through our spiritual system, which we still have control over. Nobody else has control over our spiritual system except us. And there's nothing they can do. There's no you can't go to a court, you can't do anything. But if we turn up the lever on what happens to us, then people will have respect for us. They will have respect for their ancestors. They will be afraid to talk about Harriet Tubman, as powerful as she was. So,
right, thanks for your call. We're running out of time. I want to give Umar a chance to respond.
Let me respond to that quickly. One, I agree with you that I think that our spirituality, our traditional African spiritual systems, is one of our greatest weapons. On the flip side, I want to say the way in which we practice it can also be one of our greatest weaknesses. What am I talking about? One of the most foundational aspects of African spirituality is that all humanity are one. That's understandable. I don't take an issue with that. But you also have to adopt your spiritual practice to suit the circumstances under which you exist. We live under white supremacy, white racism. So as a result of that, we have to understand that we have certain types of political and economic and eternal enemies, if you would. And I think that one of the weaknesses in our approach to African spirituality is that it is colorblind. This is one thing black people cannot afford to be. First century is color. And I say now, as spiritualists are a threat from European imperialism because of different houses, whether it's voodoo, whether it's Ifa, whether it's Kemet, Dogon, whatever the system is, we are allowing Europeans to be initiated into African traditional religion. And if you go to any black bookstore, you'll find that many of that are now considered authorities on traditional African spiritual systems, these are our mysteries, are European people. And I'm afraid that in the next 25 to 50 years, we're going to have a system where the European has totally colonized traditional African spirituality because of our political retardation, leading allowed to initiate other races into our mystery.
We gave them
All right, hang on a second, Doc, because we got to take a break. Well, I guess it's Dr. Umar Johnson. He's a direct descendant of Frederick Douglass, as we told you. He's also a psychologist by trade, also a Pan-Africanist, a Garveyite, political scientist, and the author of his best-selling book, The Holocaust Against Our Black Boys. I'm going to get into Garvey in a moment, but let's go back to these calls. We've been holding Angelo in line 1 in Cleveland, listening to us on 1490. Angelo, you're on with Dr. Umar Johnson. Is Angelo still with us? Line 1, Angelo?
Hotep. Yeah, Hotep, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, Hotep.
Hey, Carl, I love your show. The Dr. Johnson, when you coming back to Cleveland, man? When am I coming back to Cleveland? I just got an invitation to speak at Wright State University in Dayton. I'm not sure how close that is, but whenever y'all ready, my brother, just hit me up. We can make it happen. Oh man, I love you, man. And Dr. Johnson, explain to the people about the watering down of the black manhood, how they doing it. This Russell Simmons character. He one of them with them. Him and this Lil Wayne guy. They tried to get. I saw one of your DVDs, and you was talking about how they trying to water us down and eliminate the black manhood. Explain that to the people, please.
Oh, very much so. Aggressive black masculinity has always been considered a problem in America since the days of slavery. And with the technology, the improved technology of white racism now has created a paradigm where most black men, not all, but many, get interested in being successful. In the media world, the academic world, the political world, you have to tone down your masculinity. They want you to be a little bit more suave, and they want you to adopt a little bit more of a feminine posture so you appear to be less of a threat to the American social order. And I can tell you, working in higher education, many of our black male principals, many of our black male professors at the various universities, including HBCUs, not all, but a lot, increasingly more than before, are now adopting a very feminine posture so as to appear non-threatening so they can continue to pursue their chosen careers. And it's a shame that black men have to tone down their manhood and be a little bit more effeminate in their posture in order for white people to be comfortable around them. But yes, you're correct. It's taking place all over the country.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Keep telling the truth, brother. Keep telling the truth.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Angelo. Thanks for calling. Folks, whenever you hear that Dr. Umar Johnson in town, check him out because he puts on a dynamic performance. He's got stills and he's got a lot of things that he brings when he does a live presentation. It's a lot more that you can't do on the radio that you can do when you see him live. We got to tone it down a little bit for the radio because we know everybody else is listening. Dr. Umar Johnson, before we take the next call, Marcus Garvey. Why should we remember the days of Garvey?
We have to remember Marcus Garvey because Marcus Garvey is our greatest example in the 20th century of a black man who was able to organize black people and build independent black institutions, everything from schools to shipping lines to universities, without any support from the government, without any handouts from white philanthropists, and with a very firm pride in his Africanity. Marcus Garvey was one of the first men to teach us that if we're going to worship God, we should worship God in our own image. It was from Marcus Garvey that Elijah Muhammad got the idea. Marcus Garvey, in so many ways, educationally, politically, economically, internationally, in terms of Pan-Africanism, is a beacon of hope because Garvey shows us that you don't need the internet, you don't need radio, you don't need television, and you don't need money from white people in order to improve the conditions of black people. He did what he did without a single dollar, put ships on the water, without a single dollar, open universities, without a single dollar from any other race, including the government, and he did this before there was internet, radio, television, or airplane. So all of us need to study Marcus Garvey, teach our children about Marcus Garvey, and this coming Saturday, August the 17th, make sure you light a candle and pour out some water, drop out some libation for the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey and what he did for us as the father of modern black nationalism and one of the fathers of modern Pan-Africanism.
All right, we're We're gonna want to break, and when we come back, I'll take some phone calls. We also want you to address the fact that people blasted Garvey for meeting with the Klan, and how do you explain that? 877-373-9766. Number to call. Speak to Umar Johnson. We'll take your calls, folks, right after this short break. This is Trending Today. Our guest, Dr. Umar Johnson, and before we go back to phones, real quickly, Dr. Johnson, what do you say to those folks who say who blasted Marcus Garvey for meeting with a Klan leader?
The Marcus Garvey situation, much like the Douglas situation, often stems from many of our community not really having a firm understanding of the context in which the behavior took place. At the time that Marcus Garvey chose to meet with the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, Garveyites, Pan-Africanists in the southern part of the United States especially, were engaged in protracted battles with the Ku Klux Klan in defending African life. So what you had was two nations, the Garveyite Nation, or the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and the Ku Klux Klan, considered to be the government of the United States of America. What do leaders do when their countries are at war? They sit down and they create a pact or a treaty, a ceasefire, a neutral situation where they both surrender the fight. And what they did was what all nations do. Marcus Garvey, as the leader of African people globally at the time, decided to sit down with the leader of white revolt at the time to enact a ceasefire to save the lives of black people. I totally support what he did. Once we organize ourselves as a nation, yes, we're going to have to sit down and meet with Jewish people, and meet with Anglo-Saxons. We're going to have to meet with people who have historically done us no wrong. Not because, done us no good. Not because we like them, but because it's necessary in order to look out for the lives of our people. A statesman, a leader of a people cannot think the same way as an individual of the community.
All right, if you can just stay in one spot, because sometimes your phone is fading in and out. 877-373-9766 to speak to Dr. Umar Johnson. Let's go to line 5. Kenny's in Seattle, listening to us on 1620. Kenny, you're on with Dr. Johnson.
Yes, hotel.
What's that, brother?
I believe that it's crime was happening to institutions and the schools, and there's a silence. No one's saying anything. That's an illegal silence going on the schools. And Professor, I'd like you to break down for me, race to the top, or is it a race to the bottom? It started with No Child Left Behind. Can you break that down and how it's causing schools to close down? In Chicago, Philly, LA, and teachers are getting fired left and right. Janitors, cooks, everybody has anything to do with schools. The communities, you walk by the school, that was pride to be in your neighborhood and look at your school.
All right, Kenny, in the interest of time, let's give him a chance to respond. We get the gist of what you're trying to say. Dr. Umar?
Without question, what we are witnessing now is the end game. This is the final stage of the fight against school desegregation. Many of us thought that the school desegregation fight stopped with the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education decision that outlawed the use of race in education. Many of us thought that the fight stopped with the 1964 Civil Rights Bill. Many of us thought the fight stopped with the creation of special education in '75, which allowed white school districts to resegregate black children. It never stopped. The push was always to eliminate education altogether because there's no longer a need for black people in the American economic order. The schools are being shut down, so there's more money to be used to build prisons. The schools are being shut down, so there's more money at their disposal to build prisons because they no longer need an educated black worker. They have Mexicans and illegal immigrants and other Latino groups are coming over to take the jobs once occupied by black people. They don't want us around anymore. And the best way to exterminate a people is to exterminate your need for those people and your capitalistic machine. So to make a long story short, within 10, 20 years, our turn loose onto the streets with no schools to go to except those who are high achieving, whose parents can afford for them to pay for a private school, parochial school, or a charter school. The charter school was designed to destroy public school. And after the charter schools destroy public schools, they're then going to
turn the charter schools into private schools. We are witnessing the extermination of public education and the mass incarceration of black males that's going to take place on a level that you have never seen yet. And all this was being done behind the cloak of Barack Obama, the illusion of inclusion in the creation of mass confusion.
Wow. 877-373-9766, go line 4. Raymond's in Cleveland, listening to us on 1490. Raymond, you're on with Dr. Umar Johnson.
Yes, sir, Brother Carl and Brother Umar. Love the knowledge and wisdom. Brother, you're right about this school system. When we were enslaved, they didn't want us to read and write. Now, in 2013, they do not want us to read and write. This is why they are closing these schools. 2013 slavery. But may I say this, good brother? I'm tired of black people talking about, integrating with Caucasians. The first Europeans were Africans, the Grimaldi people. Okay, they occupied Europe over 50,000 years ago, before this so-called Neanderthal was a hairy ape-like creature, in which Darwin claimed that Caucasians evolved from. They didn't want to say they evolved from us. We are the mothers and fathers of every culture on this planet. And I would like to ask this, good brother. Am I right to say that Africans, we never practiced Christianity? We were spiritual beings who practiced Voodoo, which dealt with the inner soul of a man, the true Trinity, the body, the mind, and the spirit. So am I safe to say that we were not Christians? That was a religion that was forced upon us when we were being enslaved by the so-called European. And you mentioned Garvey. I'm a Garveyite too, good brother. And I'm glad you brought that truth to the surface about him meeting with the Klanner. And he also did that to see how they were organized. And that's when he organized, his black movement. And brother, we got to do like they doing us the same way. Wait a minute,
just a favor. Put in a question for me. We're running out of time to go to a break.
Yes, sir. My question to you, Brother Umar, is it time for us to separate from these beasts, or should we continue to grab their coattail? Thank you, good brother.
Well, the solution, as Marcus Garvey taught, was independent in all things. We have to become independent. As the Chinese American is, the Jewish American is, when we talk about independence, we're not talking about some type of utopia. That is impossible. Ethnic minorities come to America all the time and create realities, independent realities overnight. It's doable. But the problem is that black people have a deep-seated inferiority complex and a love for the very same system that's oppressing them. It's difficult to get us to think black and think about our own condition because we consider ourselves to be more American than anybody else in this country. And so until we change the way we think, the mind is the frontier. You have to deal with everything psychologically. Until we change the way that black people think, we won't be able to change anything else about our condition, which is why I am an advocate of independent African-centered schools, and that's why I'm trying to build the Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey Academy.
Real quickly, Brother Omar, we got a question here it says, how can we utilize our African spirituality when we have completely abandoned it for the European version of Christianity? Why can't our eyes be open to see the lack of validity of a false faith? This is somebody tweeting a question for you.
Well, we can use our spirituality as a benefit. The problem is, a lot of black people have been educated and socialized to see any type of African religion as demonology. They look at voodoo as demonology, and we can thank Hollywood for the negative characterizations of the religion of voodoo. But whether it's Kemet, whether it's the EFA system that I study, they see it as demonic. So again, you're going to have to go through a lot of psychological reconstruction and re-education to teach black people that all the religions that they belong to are nothing more than aspects of that one great African spiritual system. But that's going to take a lot of work. And we better do it soon because, as I said earlier, Europeans are beginning to study, master, and colonize African spiritual systems. And in about 20 years, if we don't reverse this situation, if you want to learn about African religion, you're going to have to learn about it from a white person.